Go. Week 12 YarskCap. We are here in the heart of Texas. We are currently in Bryan, just outside of College Station. We're currently in Bryan, Texas, where the Iowa State Cyclones just absolutely kicked the shit out of the Longhorns. I'm here with my co-host, as always, Mr. Zachariah Robeck. Zach, we're back on video. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. I'm doing great. We got. I'm here with my favorite people. We coming off a big Iowa State win. Now we get to talk some fantasy football. I mean, when we started this, we were a little podcast in our basement, and now look at us. We got a live audience. We got a live backdrop with some cows. I mean,
look at that cow. I mean, more money, more problems. I mean, the more money that we get, the more money that we're gonna have, baby. And that's the beauty of it all. I mean, we now went from 0 viewers to now we have 3 viewers, and now we have girlfriends that are wanting to subscribe, relatives, siblings. I mean, this thing is going off the charts, and you know what? The sky's the limit, and if you don't reach for the moon, at least you're gonna reach the stars.
Mama made.
So, you know what? We are now officially through 11 weeks of the Yarski, and it is just a beautiful thing to see. We have coming down to the wire. What are your lasting thoughts going into the last few weeks of the season?
I mean, what our big worry was a couple weeks ago was that there was going to be no intrigue down the stretch. We were worried that there was going to be just the playoffs were going to be set in stone. But here we are with plenty of scenarios, how things could work out. We've got 4 teams still batting for it. So honestly, it's just what we asked for with the Yarski.
All the drama, and we're definitely going to dive into that here soon. But first, we're going to do a quick premise because there's breaking news that we had within the last hour. As you know, COVID is a son of a bitch, and so we're obviously always trying to stay water, always trying to stay with the times and all the ever-changing COVID market. As of right now, the Ravens-Steelers game is currently rescheduled. It was supposed to be on Thanksgiving Day. It is now scheduled for Tuesday. So right now, our initial plan is the game is going to be as scheduled. It will count towards your Week 12 matchups. However, if that game is canceled, if a player is previously identified, for example, Ross Clucky, he is starting the Pittsburgh Steelers defense and doesn't have a defense readily available on his team. His plan as a backup, because the Steelers have already had their bye, since they should not incur a second bye because that is unfair and that does not happen in a normal league year. He will identify a defense that's on the waiver wire, and that will be his substitute defense that he will get those points for. And that is the same for all Steelers and Ravens players. We need to make sure that we're staying consistent in the ever-changing market. If you have a starter for the Ravens or Steelers, identify your replacement before kickoff, and then you will get those points adjusted to your team score, unless you're Jared, because I need you to lose this week.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I mean, honestly, we were spoiled for a couple weeks. We had this scenario back. I think Pooty had this where he's basically telling you, hey, I identified this guy on the waiver wire as my backup in case something happens. Mm-hmm. We haven't had to deal with it for a while, so we've been kind of spoiled. So it's nothing's changed. We're just kind of recapping to make sure everyone's on the same page there.
Yep, and it's always an ever-changing market, and we'll try to keep as best communication as we can between the two teams that will be impacted, and we're just trying to do our best in this COVID year, but in the end, thank God that we have football. But now back to our regular stuff that we want to kind of hit on. The very first thing that I kind of wanted to touch base on was, Zach, we touched on it a little bit last week with your Taysom Hill acquisition. We talked about it, how we were surprised we were the only two to potentially make a claim because we knew he was tight end eligible, but as a quarterback, he had the potential to be a starter.
Right.
All of a sudden, he became a starter, and you received a lot of trade offers, but you couldn't pull the trigger. You want to dive into that a little bit?
Not just quantity, not a lot, but very good offers. Mm-hmm. They were very tempting. We almost talked it into existence. We said, how fun would it be if you could have the quarterback in your tight end slot? Mm-hmm. Sure enough, all of a sudden, Sean Payton goes, you know what, Jameis? We're not going to be eating those W's. We're going to hand the ball to Taysom Hill. We're going to let him run the show. And honestly, it was a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. So the best offer I had was from Build, who last week, if you remember, was in a absolute must-win game with Jared. He had to win, and he was nervous. Mm-hmm. So what he did was basically offer me Mark Andrews and my option of Terry McLaurin or Antonio Gibson.
Yeah.
Which is an absolutely I couldn't believe it when he offered it to me. He said, what's it going to take to get Taysom Hill? And I said, let's hear your best offer, thinking there would be no shot that we would even get close.
Yep.
And sure enough, it was about as good of an offer as I could have ever asked for.
It was an absolute smash offer, and I know you waited until after the noon games got started to tell me what the final offer was because you were potentially entertaining some deals. And me just looking at, I understand because your whole mindset was to try and get that week 14 bye for the playoffs because that is so vital. I remember when we first had our league in the first year, I was the number 1 seed. I traded away a lesser running back for DeMarco Murray, who's on a bye.
Right.
It cost me the bye. All of a sudden, I get upset in the first round, and you people take for granted how vital that bye is.
Exactly. I didn't want to roll that dice. Basically, it was a short-term play. Taysom Hill in your tight end spot was basically guaranteeing yourself a win this week. It was a lot of fun. And I sacrificed the long-term play. Obviously, we're recording this on Friday, so we just watched Antonio Gibson go for 3 touchdowns on Thanksgiving, so it stung a little bit more. But you know what? At the end of it, fantasy football is supposed to be fun, and boy, was it fun watching Taysom Hill, my tight end, throwing passes to my receiver, Michael Thomas. So not only did I have Taysom Hill in the tight end spot, but it was a stack with Michael Thomas. It was a lot of fun. We scored a lot of points. We got the victory. So
in the end, I mean, that's the one thing. In fantasy football, from time to time, you need to just take it from short term to long term. You saw your 1 week goal, you got your 1 week win, and that's truly all that matters.
Right. Hindsight's 20/20. Everybody can look back and say, "Oh, you're an idiot for not taking that." You know, at the time, I said, "I don't want to play any games. Schultes has a good team. He's been scoring a lot of points. Let's not mess around. Let's get the victory, and then we'll figure out the tight end solution later."
Yep. Nope. I 100% agree.
So, go ahead.
I was about to say, and then there's one other deal, big trade that some people stirred a little bit of controversy this week. I made a deal with Kyler, and you want to give your quick, really thoughts on it, and then I'll tell you my rationale behind it?
Yes. So we talked about this already. When I first saw it, it felt gross.
Yep.
Okay, and let me tell you why. I think there is roughly a 50%. Should we tell the deal first, probably?
Yeah, so I guess first in context, me and Kyler did a deal for Joe Mixon and Darren Waller for Travis Kelce. And so, as a little bit of premise behind the deal, there's been at least 3 teams I know that have been super hard after Travis Kelce the whole entire year. Myself, Zach, and Jake Built. And the rationale behind that is that for tight ends, Travis Kelce is a tier above everyone else. And then there's a tier that is Darren Waller, and then there's pretty much everyone else. The number 3 through 12, you can pretty much throw in a blender, and they're pretty much the same. So the rationale was I'm going to trade him that second tier tight end and Joe Mixon, who obviously is injured right now on the IR, but is eligible to come back week 14. And my pitch to Kyler was like, hey, Kyler, you know that right now you have no chance of the playoffs, and your goal is to win week 15 or 16.
Right.
One of those 2 weeks to not get the sacco, because Lord only knows that Jack cannot have that sacco sitting up there in his bedroom. And so my rationale was like, hey, I mean, you can obviously keep Travis Kelce, he's very good, or you could have Waller, who's still very good, and Mixon, who's a potential top 15, top 20 running back. But there's obvious associated risk with it.
Right. And, you know, add to it the fact that Kyler is very RB thin. He clearly needs the running back. So the fact that it just felt gross when I saw it was because I think, again, I don't know anything, but I think there's roughly a 50% chance that Joe Mixon gets shut down for the year. The Bengals aren't playing anything. Joe Burrow just basically tore his ACL. He's out for the year.
Yep.
They're not going to win they're not going to make the playoffs. They actually benefit from losing to get a better position. So I think it's roughly a 50% chance that Joe Burrow gets shut down for the year. I'm sorry, that Joe Mixon gets shut down for the year. And you also had Joe Mixon's handcuff, Geo, and that wasn't included. So first taste, it felt gross. It felt a little, obviously if Joe Mixon comes back week 14 and he's 100%, and 15 and 16 he balls out and gets Kyler out of the playoffs, it'll all be worth it. It just felt gross now, but it's a free country, and I see why Kyler did it. It just felt gross at first when I saw it.
So one quick question, because we're all live on air. Was it gross because you are worried about me being in the playoffs and now acquiring Kelce, or are you just more intimidated by my team, or do you truly feel like it was an unfair trade?
I knew that was coming. I knew that there was going to be but Zach's just jealous. No, it just felt gross. I really think there's a good chance that they shut Joe Mixon down completely. So I think Travis Kelce is an absolute full tier above Waller. So the asking price to get Kelce has to be so high. So to get a broken running back who honestly hasn't been very good, even when he has been playing,
That's where I will disagree. He was ranked in the top 15 running backs when he was active.
Because he had 140 burger.
No, outside the first week and the 40 burger, he averaged 10 to 15 points a week.
Yeah, see, it just didn't feel like it was enough, a broken running back, and we can agree to disagree. Hindsight, maybe at the end of the year, we'll look back. Hopefully it works out for Kyler. It just felt gross when I saw it. So that's my opinion.
That's the beauty of it, and that's the one thing that we always take for granted. So many people have accused you of doing unfair trades with Jared. All of a sudden, Jared comes up, ace of spades, and he's sitting there in the cash. And so many people made fun of Jared's earlier trade with Lamar Jackson and hold on to Aaron Rodgers, but he ended up cashing in very well on that. So
exactly.
That's the beauty of fantasy football. You just wait it out and see what all happens.
Correct. Yeah, we'll look back and we'll kind of see how it goes. And again, me saying it's gross isn't me saying like, oh, we should have vetoed it or anything like that. It's a free country. Kyler's running his team. It wasn't collusion. So we let it happen. We'll see how it goes at the end of the year.
Yep, okay, so one thing we want to touch on really quick is last week's matchup. I know we want to highlight really quick because I know we were already kind of running long talking about trades. Highlight the big last week matchup between Pooty and Ross. Just give a high-level overview.
Yeah, it was a heavyweight bout. That's what we wanted. We wanted to see the two big dogs go at it, and it was a really good game. The problem was, and I think it was the difference in the game, is that Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs probably, outside of Dalvin Cook, probably Pooty, some of his best players weren't active, and that was probably the difference in the matchup.
I think they make the difference because Joe Burrow, he's sitting there, he got hurt in the early third quarter, and so that's how many points that he potentially is losing out on there.
Yes,
and Travis Fulgham, who he started, he ended up only getting less than 4 or 5 points, where if he puts in Diggs, he's almost locked and loaded for 10, and all of a sudden that's the difference in the game.
Exactly. So, I should look quick to see how much Ross ended up winning by, but
it wasn't enough of a difference. I think the key difference was if Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen are playing, Pooty on a normal week is going to get that win.
Yes.
But you want to know what the one thing is? We take into context, so many people have bye weeks, and you know what? Pooty happened to have his, and you know what? You also deserve a loss every once in a while if you don't have the backups for your position.
Well, and everybody has bye weeks. So the fact that Pooty just wasn't able to put good players in his team shows that he didn't have the depth that he needed to get the job done when those guys were on bye. So, I think that was the big difference maker. It ended up being like a 17-point game. So I do think if Josh Allen plays with Stephon Diggs, he probably makes up that difference. But everybody has buys throughout the whole year. So, I think that speaks a little bit to Pooty's depth, maybe a little bit. So, maybe we'll get a chance to hear what he thinks about that.
And that's the beautiful thing. I mean, that's the one thing is Pooty's in such a secure playoff position. He doesn't need to worry about the buys. He doesn't need to worry about dropping those high upside players.
Right.
If he loses the game, it's not the end of the world. But you know what? Losing that bye does hurt. But with that in mind, I think we're going to try and bring along, we're going to do a special for the people on this Thanksgiving weekend. We got 2 for guests. We're going to start it off with the winner of last week's high upside matchup, Mr. Ross Clucky. Mr. Ross Clucky, welcome to the show, sir.
Take a seat.
How are you doing, good sir?
I'm doing all right.
First off, I would like to congratulate you on your win and securing the first round bye.
Thank you.
I guess I kind
appreciate
of want to give you a high level question. Last year your team name was This Is Easy.
Yep.
But unfortunately you were in the Sacco playoffs.
True.
But this year, all of a sudden you had the high upside with Derrick Henry as your keeper.
Yep.
All of a sudden you're at the top of the Natty Light division, the most tasty division of them all. Can you kind of give some rationale you're thinking of last year going into this year?
Well, everyone knows, especially newcomers to the league, that the real goal of the league is to not lose. Winning is bread, it's fantastic. It's cherry on top. But if you don't lose, you want. It's not if you're not first or last. That doesn't exist.
You obviously don't know Ricky Bobby.
I know exactly. Ricky Bobby mentality does not exist in the YarskCap. Okay, it's just not there. As long as you don't have the ball sack sitting on your mantle, you are champion. Okay, having the belt around your waist means you get to strut a little wider for a year. That's fantastic. It's glorious. I hope to experience this someday in my life. But since I didn't last year, I didn't have the ball sack on my mantle. I was happy.
You were a happy man. So, okay. That's one thing that we appreciate. But then I do have one quick question on you.
Yeah.
I know you've been dealing with a little bit of injuries with Myles Gaskin. You had the problem with not necessarily the receiving core, but you've had Dak Prescott get injured. That really decimated those Dallas wide receivers years.
Yep.
How do you feel about your wide receivers too, and in general your flex position? Because right now it's not necessarily a strength of your team, despite you having the number 1 seed guaranteed in the Natty Light division.
it's something you guys have brought up on this podcast multiple times, is my lack of depth. And really, if you look at how I drafted, I actually drafted with some decent depth. And I actually used some of my later picks for some like risky business. I actually drafted Taysom Hill with the thought of exactly what happened last weekend being a possibility in the future. Unfortunately, I had to get rid of him because of the fact that, you know, Dak going down, some other people had injuries.
You had Waller the whole time. So it was tough to get him in the lineup.
And then the other, like, I had some people that really just didn't pan out. It was just overall a bad pick that I just didn't foresee. So now, if you actually look at my bench, it's not a fantastic bench. It's not something where I say I'm not worried week to week with somebody going out. But I have a bench that gives me multiple people that I can throw in as needed and not say it's a done week sort of thing.
I think what you're saying is big. You're saying you have options, which gives you flexibility. So in the future, you can play the matchups. If Myles Gaskin or Sterling Shepard or Gus Edwards, if one of those guys has a really good matchup, you have options going forward. You're not pigeonholed into playing one player because he's been in your lineup all year. So I think depth gives you options, and that's kind of what you're saying you got.
I think obviously my running backs are selected. They're going to be in there. They're not going to move.
I miss
you sure?
I want.
Are you sure?
No, they're
Is
going to
there any trade that we can do on the podcast?
I mean,
for
I'm honestly not going to say that there wouldn't be a trade for Derrick Henry out there, but
Boy, I will
say
Kelsey for Henry.
No, I'm not there. I'm not there for that. But I will say that those positions are obviously if they're on my roster, they're being started. Whereas my wide receiver spots, they could move week to week, no problem. Julio Jones, more or less, is a pretty much guaranteed start most days of the week. This week,
when healthy.
That's the tough part. Is like he's someone that plays through a lot of injuries. Last week we saw it. He played, only did like 35% of the snaps, and that really hurts me. So I have to think about that because I have some options on my bench that are actually wide receivers. I can put up some big numbers and are end zone targets. So it makes it a tough call.
I think it's been a recurring theme that in terms of a starting lineup, your team is as top heavy as it get. The one thing is, can those players stay healthy? Amari Cooper, he has a past injury bug, but right now this year he's been healthy. But obviously the Dak Prescott injury affected him. Julio Jones, how his injury is going to affect him. Otherwise, he's a bona fide stud. So I think the key thing of your team is going to be the go forward health. And obviously Deshaun Watson, ever since Bill O'Brien has been fired, Romeo Crennel takes over. All of a sudden, he's a top 5 quarterback again, which has been huge for your team.
I think I was always happy with my Deshaun pick. There were definitely some games that I think other people would have thought, oh, you got to start looking to a number 2 quarterback. But Deshaun is an athlete. He's a competitor. And I knew he'd find a way to win. He has some threats out there. At wide receivers, they're not huge, but Will Fuller is on it. In my opinion, can be as good as DeAndre game to game. Overall season, no, but game to game, he can easily put up the same numbers.
So long as he's healthy, absolutely. Nope, I 100% agree. So I used to have Will Fuller, and the only reason I traded him away, not because of his upside, is because of his injury history. So I see the upside. So the last question I truly had for you was, right now, you had the first round bye locked and loaded. You are officially good until week 15. What is your number 1 opponent that you potentially want to play if you're gauging the fantasy football playoffs?
So if I'm looking at the power rankings, and most likely to be making the YarskCap playoffs. Oh, that's tough. I mean, honestly, my matchup this week, I feel good about. Jared.
Sacco.
You know,
he is Sacco until he
Jared,
is.
Let me just get this off my chest, okay? I've been feeling it for a while. I know I'm the one that brought it up in the group chat that you've been getting picked on by this guy over here, and then he comes on for 45 minutes and chirps about how that's not legitimate and uses this guy over here to stroke his ego about it. But let's talk, okay? You draft, you're number 1 out of the draft. Fantastic job on the draft. You're doing fantastic. I think you went 4-0 to start the season.
You did.
Does that sound right?
He was undefeated at the first YarskCap podcast.
Yeah.
YarskCap podcast.
Amazing. Great job, Jared. Going from YarskCap to undefeated 4 games in. Wow. Fantastic.
Off to a hot start.
Now let's look at the trades.
Just look in the mirror.
Let's I know you hear from these two that, oh, the trades. Look at the next week after the trade. Jared actually came out on the positive. Well, why does he keep losing then? Let's think about that. It doesn't matter if you get more points here or there. It's longevity and it's W's. That's what this league is. Longevity and W's. Jared, you're better than that. Get back to where you started.
I mean, I don't know if we can end it on a better note.
Well, first of all, I feel like that was a shot at me. So
It was a shot at both of you.
presidential debate rules. I have to respond. I think what it boils down to is not so much that Jared has been making bad trades. I think he's been making poor start-sit decisions.
I will agree with that too.
Which, when it boils down, if you put the right people in your lineup and you have guys that score points, you can win games. You know, the fact that he's been on an absolute slide these last is almost unprecedented. So I think it's more the start-sit decisions than anything. Because when we look back, and I think hopefully we'll get a chance sometime to look back through some of the trades.
Yeah.
I think the proof will be in the pudding that honestly they were pretty good trades. But it's easy to say that when I'm 9-2 and Jared's 5-6 or something like that.
Some agreement in the back.
Problem.
Agreement in the back. Well, boys.
And with
it
that,
was great.
it was a pleasure to have our first
Appreciate it.
Thanks
guest.
for having me.
And with that, we are now going to bring in our second guest, the number one person that has never ever made the playoffs, but is now officially locked in, Mr. Taylor Pudens. Mr. Pudens, Mr. Alpha Male, how are you doing this beautiful Friday afternoon?
Very good. I mean,
Very good?
We just beat Texas at Texas and secured our spot in the Big 12 championship.
All right. So
What better situation could you be?
there is zero better situation. I mean, it would
Talking
be.
about fantasy football. That just
I mean,
feels
we
good.
could talk about fantasy
That's-
football.
that's
We
a
could have a
second.
few
That's
beers
a
and
second.
shotgun, but then we could all
Right.
worry about that later. But the one thing I kind of want to lead it off, obviously the monkey out the back. You're making the playoffs.
Yeah, congrats.
You're not
buddy.
dealing with the sack. You pretty much already won your Super Bowl. What are your thoughts? And what are your thoughts on A, making your first playoffs, and B, what are your thoughts like now? Are you trying to go for a championship, or did you do anything different this year?
Definitely didn't do anything different this year, but I'm definitely going to go for it. I mean,
You're not just going to roll over and take all your players out of your lineup?
definitely not. I mean, what I did differently is it's really hard to say because I mean the draft. I look at my team now compared to what I drafted. I mean it's pretty identical. So it's pretty much just those players producing. I mean it's.
Do you remember what you told us after the draft?
Yeah, I was not happy with the team.
So I don't know what that says. If maybe you kinda,
Okay. I was nervous about Allen. I
Okay.
drafted him late,
right?
and then Chubb went out early,
Sure.
and then my receivers I was questionable on. Diggs, I mean,
Right.
I didn't know how he would produce with Allen,
Mm-hmm.
and Thielen. I mean, obviously Thielen's going to be Thielen, but with Cousins, it's tough to really say like how that's going to be a good matchup.
I think the fear with Thielen is that they want to hand the ball off basically every time they
Correct.
can. So the fear is that Thielen's just not going to get the volume. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
agree.
I would love to say that I try to draft off like good quarterbacks, but when you look at Thielen with Cook, or not with Cook, with Cousins, it's tough to really say that Cousins is a good quarterback.
Well, it sure seems like a good pick right now because I think he's leading the NFL in touchdowns. So
Now it looks great.
The thing is, yeah, he has a whole bunch of high upside plays, but then he also will randomly have a week where Dalvin Cook goes off. But the thing is, you're still the beneficiary of that when Dalvin Cook goes off.
Correct.
So you also have your good balance of power. So one thing I checked out your team really quick. I think you only have potentially one weak spot for the playoffs, and it is your flex position. So I'm looking right now. You're kind of battling between DJ Moore, Alan Lazard, Melvin Gordon, and Travis Fulgham.
See, I think that's not a weakness. I think that's a good position to be in to have that many people to choose from.
So are you worried at all that you have to play Russian roulette and trying to pick between who is going to be the one to pop off that week? Because Melvin Gordon last week all of a sudden pops off in a not a good matchup. All of a sudden he's sitting on your bench. Whereas you played Travis Fulgham in a plus matchup and all of a sudden he only gets 2 catches. So are you at all worried about that flex position?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, but it's also better than choosing shit for shit. I mean, like,
it's similar to what Ross is saying. You have options.
absolutely.
So you feel pretty comfortable that going forward, when it counts, you can make the right start-sit decision.
I'm not confident I'm going to make the right decision, but if I don't make the right decision, at least that player still could produce a great result.
The decision you choose isn't going to just tank your team.
Yes.
Is what I'm saying. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's key.
To your comment before, I think that I have a better depth in that regards to making the playoffs, or not making the playoffs, but going deep in the playoffs. I think I have great depth into that receiver and flex position.
And I think this year, more than any other year, depth is critical, because look at COVID, look at what's happening to, Adam Thielen this week, probably not going to play. So there, boom, depth is huge this year, probably more than ever. So we've talked a lot about it, and I think it's kind of showing true to be very important.
Yeah, I think my team has pretty good depth. I think, I can start this week Diggs and Moore, and then put either my
Melvin
Gordon or Fulgham.
Yeah. You've also got Jamison
Or
Crowder.
Lazard. I mean, he started off the season so hot.
Crowder, the same thing, was really hot early.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think he gets Darnold back this week, which I honestly think will help Crowder.
I mean, Crowder. I mean, like, same thing. You draft one quarter. I try to draft on quarterbacks. I mean, that's a terrible team. but he's also produced a lot of points with a terrible team.
Nice thing about the terrible team is they're going to have to throw the ball a lot.
Correct.
And in the end, you cannot turn down production. So I guess we're going to try and wrap it up really quick with this last question. Same question that we had for Ross is, first round playoffs, you potentially, right now, you're not looking as good for the bye with the loss last week.
Yeah.
But first round of the playoffs, who is the number one person that you potentially want to see? And we're going to take away Jared because Ross already picked him. Who is the number one team that you potentially want to see?
It's so tough because there's still a lot of people left to go for that last position. So it's
So right now you're battling between, let's just say hypothetically, we're going between Schultes, we're going between Bill, and myself. Let's say between those three teams. You want to play me? You want to play me? What's the rationale behind that?
Bill's got the most points in the league.
Yes.
Schultes has the most potential to score points in the league.
Yep.
You are
suck.
I'm not gonna sugarcoat this. I mean, you haven't produced.
Yeah. Okay.
The other thing about Schultes is, who's had a couple tough weeks, I do think in the playoffs.
I met Schultes on his worst week ever, which is great.
Right. I do think in the playoffs, let's say Schultes gets in, I do think Christian McCaffrey probably will be back.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously his lineup looks.
I mean, don't get me wrong. You have a lot of upside.
Yes.
You just haven't shown it.
And the thing is, like,
is that
great.
fair?
I mean, your record speaks to it. I mean, you scored points, but
I score the points, but I haven't quite resulted the wins. And
I mean,
100%
your
understand.
team's not shitty. It's just hasn't, like, you haven't hit your full potential.
And you know what? I understand that. And the one thing is that my team does not have that every other team that you were comparing to as. It doesn't have the high upside running back. Right now, my team is very stacked at receiver and tight end. But a lot of people are stacked at those positions potentially. And so I try to make up the difference because I can't trade for the running back. And so I try and make do, but I realize there is a ceiling to my team that isn't quite realized if Christian McCaffrey is playing.
All right, I'm going to ask you both the same question. Who would you rather play?
well, what I was going to say is, you shouldn't take it personally. I think what Pootie's saying is there's a tough team still that are hanging around. Bill scored the most points.
Jared is the bottom of the tier.
Well, and I think power rankings will reflect that.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
But I mean, like, that conversation, Bill has scored the most points.
Right. Bill just popped off for 150 last week.
Yeah. I mean, like,
So
it's ridiculous.
So yeah, I don't think you're saying.
It's not saying that my team is
no good.
shitty. The thing is, there's three good teams, and you have to pick one of the lesser of three good teams.
It's not like it's going to be like a huge drop off
Right.
in the YarskCap playoffs.
Yep.
It's just going to be.
Well, I mean that's what
what the playoffs are for, baby.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the survival of the fittest. It's the kind of the best going at it. So
But the Busch Light League over the.
was it a meat grinder this year?
jeez.
All I know is the Natty Light ended up coming back pretty decent.
How?
That's because we had beaten each other up so bad. You finally get us at our, not our best.
All I know is the last few weeks, I think the Natty Light has beat the Busch Light division head-to-head interdivision records. But you know what? There's only so much we can truly do. So I think that's the last question that we truly had
I
for
think one thing
Mr.
we should
Prudence. But
maybe
you want to
open
go
the
ahead?
floor is just say, is there anything you wanted to bring up quick while we got you on here? Is there anything you wanted to ask of us? Or, we could turn the floor over to you.
Ooh, well, that's a good question.
You're a first caller question, so you might as well. This is a little bit scary now.
So if you get into the YarskCap, you're going to play your keepers any different?
If I'm guaranteed into the YarskCap, I will definitely be shooting for the back-to-back championship because that's once in a lifetime.
But keeper-wise?
Flags fly forever.
In terms of keepers, if I happen to lose this week and Jared wins this week, I know I've been saying for a few weeks that...
Are you going to dive the Sacco to keep a great or to go for a good keeper?
I will not. I will go for the YarskCap playoffs because the infinite wisdom of winning the back-to-back YarskCap championship is greater than losing the potential of losing the Sacco, because I look at Josh and Seth's team and they smell like so much worse manure than these cows behind us. that I'm not even worried about that. Like, I could legitimately be bringing out my bench, and I would be beating them.
So I think what Hootie's asking is a good question, though. So what you're saying is that, let's say Jared wins this week and you lose, which gets you out of the playoffs.
Yes.
Okay. So you're willing to trade away, like, let's say Tyreek Hill, who would be a first-round pick, so unlikely for you to keep. You would trade away Tyreek Hill for a potentially a good keeper next year who wouldn't help you stay out of the Sacco.
Yep, I 100% understand that question, and I've thought about that for a few weeks because that was my rationale before I went on my 3-game win streak after I beat Jared, because he sucks and he's going to continue to lose. But my rationale was, even if I happen to lose this week and Jared wins, which is unlikely because Deshaun Watson absolutely killed it for Roscoe. Let's go, Ross. And so my rationale is, even if I happen to lose and Jared wins this week, I think the chances are high that I will potentially win against Pootie's below average dog shit team next week. And
Bulletin board material. This is going to the internet, so you can't delete that, Kirby.
And then I believe that Schultes, I will trade all of my team to Schultes to make sure that he beats Jared, and that's what cost of doing battle. I want to make the playoffs, and that's what I got to do.
All right, so I'm going to bring up the same question.
Okay.
I shouldn't say same question, same conversation. How do you feel about keepers?
Personally, right now, I'm leaning towards voting towards no keepers next year. That's my personal opinion.
What is your rationale behind it now? Because you were all for keepers.
Very for keepers.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what's your rationale?
You know, I was really looking forward to the, like, rewarding the person who
Found the diamond in the rough.
found the diamond in the rough. You know,
But it turned into keeping the best in drafting the best.
it turned into kind of an imbalance of power, maybe.
Yeah.
I would say. So you know, I
Did Ross
skew it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think going and I mean he played the game the way it was set up.
Absolutely.
So
I mean, he took advantage of what it was there.
Exactly.
Everyone
This
had a chance
is
to draft
easy.
Derrick Henry
Right.
in the 3rd round last year, and nobody else did it.
Right,
The
we're
4th
not
round.
But
we're not harping on.
I agree with
how it
Zach
went.
saying
So-
it was not rewarding the person that found the guy that went from could have been the 10th round pick last year to a 2nd or 3rd round.
Yeah.
So wait, just to make sure we have clear context. So, like, are we saying, like, not having it affected next year? Are we still going to have it affected for the draft next year, but no longer going forward?
If it was me,
If it was me, I'd vote for against it, which I was very vocal from the start.
yeah,
That makes it a little difficult because I made my draft based on having keepers the next year.
I 100% hear you. I'm just saying, right now, if it was me, I would vote to just eradicate the keeper rule completely.
I am going to say that is bullshit, but we will leave that for a future
No,
podcast.
I don't think so. I think we should talk about this right now.
Didn't my draft would be affected if I know there was no keepers the next
I agree.
year? Wouldn't it?
Round table.
It's a power of the
wouldn't have-
voice.
You would need
have
to
a
establish it before a draft.
Wouldn't have everyone's keeper or draft been affected by the rules at that time? So now it's
Okay.
Some would be affected to a greater
Let's pause
extent.
here. What would you have changed?
I would not have drafted J.K. Dobbins in the 8th round.
When you would never drafted him?
I would not have drafted him in the 8th round. I
Who
would
would you
have
have?
drafted him.
Who would you have drafted that time?
Josh Allen. I rest my case.
No,
I rest my case.
I completely agree with Kirby. I think, like, I drafted Zach Moss, thinking there was like a big upside, and
You
in
draft
case-
young
He
rookies
was even
with
the
high
starting
upside.
running back.
No, not
I know he was not at the
wasn't,
time.
But, if
But
someone
what if
got
Devin
injured,
Singletary is gone
yeah,
next year?
Boom.
You
All
draft
of a sudden,
players for upside.
That's a huge.
If
key.
you establish it before the draft, I 100%
Okay, but
agree.
if people
I-
vote to get rid of it, what are you gonna do?
That's what I'm saying.
I established it before the draft. Like, if we want to change it, we need to say it before the draft.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I think basically if the Yarsky
Would you not
votes-
change your draft if you knew there was no keepers?
I don't. I'd have to look.
Why
guess I
would
don't
you
think
draft
so.
for keepers for next year?
Because you're
Why
taking
did I
the
draft
risk.
Kareem Hunt when I knew he was suspended for 9 games last year? There was keepers.
Yeah, I'm just saying. I think.
I rest my case.
I think that if the Yarsky 6 out of 10 of the Yarsky members vote that they don't want to do keepers, then I think that's
The
kind
only
of
problem is that majority
keeper
was
stuff.
not concluded before last year's draft.
Yeah. See, and I think
I brought
If
it up
we-
to everybody. I said, "Do we want any potential rule changes?"
I tell you he was going to defend this pretty heavy.
I said, "Was there any potential rule changes we want to bring up?" Did anyone bring anything up?
Yeah, me. Nope.
No, there was not.
Well, because we hadn't seen how the keepers were going to go.
Well, we brought it up, and
We
then
saw
I've
firsthand after he
I've
drafted.
sent different texts.
First
like,
two-
if there's any
first two
potential
fucking
rule
rounds.
changes we want to have, send it to the group.
All I'm saying is
To your
that
agreement,
probably
CBA.
if the vote comes out and everyone votes that they don't want keepers, I think it's going to be hard to keep keepers
going in forward to next year. I would agree.
I think it's going to get eradicated completely.
We're going to settle this for a different one because we're wasting too much
Yarsky,
time.
just keep in mind, send out your opinions. We'll get an idea and we'll go forward from there.
Look at his first 2 draft picks. This is going to get eradicated.
This could be you someday. Keep that in mind.
Oh shit! I feel like we're going too long. Do we even want to keep doing all of our fucking segments?
Yeah, we'll breeze through. We'll do the power rankings.
All right, really
Cheers.
quick,
Go State.
really quick power rankings. Zach, go ahead and lead it off. Put
We're
here,
only
Ross. Can you grab me a beer?
You see where we're at?
Yeah, we're in Texas.
Yeah. So podcasts are bigger in Texas.
They are bigger in Texas.
Come on.
Someone can grab me a bigger beer.
So I mean, where does that get us? Are we at the power rankings? Is that
Power
where we wanna go?
rankings. Recap it. Oh,
Oh, shotgun it. Kirby,
that's-
shotgun on the thing. That would be cool. On the thing.
Ready? Go.
Ooh, that's gonna be a
I
tough
don't know
shotgun.
what the fuck
That's
to
a tough
do.
shotgun. Don't. Do it in camera. Do it in camera. Go, 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 go.
I'm trying to find some shit. I got it. Shit.
For the Yarsky.
All right, we're good. For a while. I'm not shotgunning.
We're good for a while.
I am gonna need another beer. But
Okay. What will?
right.
What a perfect segue.
technical difficulties into the power
Into the
rankings.
power
Obviously, my beer was not at number 1 seed. So where do we all got it? Let's start the bottom 4 teams, then we'll go in tiers of 3 like we usually do.
Okay. Bottom 4.
Let's go NASCAR round. Really quick, high overview.
We have the exact same 4 in the exact same rankings. We're gonna go Axman at 10. We're going to go Sap at 9, despite winning last week.
Yep.
Nice victory, but I still prefer Kyler, who I have at 7, or I'm sorry, at 8. I prefer his squad a little bit more than Sap's, and then at 7, I still got Jared, who continues on his slide. Lost 6 of the last 7 after his 4-0 start. We've kind of brought that up already. He's got Ross this week, and then Schultes. So, things could get really interesting down the stretch there. So, I'm really excited about how that's going to all shake out, But right now, that's kind of the bottom 4 of the power.
We're going to see a little bit of controversy, I think, between the Sap and the Kyler talk. But the one thing you also got to take into account is those teams played head-to-head earlier, and Kyler did beat Sap. So no matter what Sap's going to say about him winning last week,
Right.
in the end, you look at the long term of the season, and you think Kyler's team definitely is better.
You're agreeing?
Yes, I
Okay.
100% agree. The bottom 4 is locked and loaded so long as I'm not in it.
Yeah, Sap can argue all he wants. His team is stinky garbage. So
He'll end up pissing his pants later, so who cares?
So after this, we had kind of not really a big shakeup, but what I have is you at 6.
Yep.
You were at 5 last week.
Yep.
Then I have Schultes at 5, who was at 4 last week. Schultes is coming off back-to-back losses.
Yep.
He loses Christian McCaffrey again this week and the next week. Still hasn't secured his playoff position. He's got Built this week, and then Jared. So
Sacco.
basically all Schultes needs is a win out of those 2 weeks, and then he's in.
Yep.
Okay.
He's almost locked in, and that's the one thing that you kind of touched on is it's going to be a little, like the only reason it's a little interesting is because McCaffrey's not playing this week or next week.
Exactly.
But if he happens to find his way into the playoffs, he is a very dangerous team.
We also got news while we were doing Todd Gurley also not playing this week, which is another one of his running backs.
Breaking news. Hopefully he's paying attention to the podcast and is actually going to pick this up. But if not, it's a real shame. Actually, I want Schultes to win, so let's go Schultes.
So after that, I've got Built at the 4 seed. Last week we had him at the 6. We kind of buried him coming off his loss. He kind of destroys Jared this week, drops the highest points of the week. I think he's got Schultes this week and Ross. Basically, if Built wins one of the 2 weeks, just similar to Schultes, he's in.
Yep.
So he's got the most points on the total year. I've got him at the 4 seed. Anything you would do differently in that middle tier?
There's nothing you can really do there. Like you brought me up to 5 and brought me down to 6, and in all honesty, I don't have the running back upside to truly be in that upper echelon. I'm thankful to truly just be in the top 6, and I'm just trying to do whatever I can. And like you said, number 5, you have Schultes, where he obviously is a very good team, but with McCaffrey, it's truly hard to gauge where his team can go.
Right.
But with number 4, with Bill, he's the most points scored in the league, and it's just the overlying worry of Ezekiel Elliott, but luckily he has Antonio Gibson that's kicking ass and taking names.
Yeah.
So he's a solid at the number 4 slot, and
Right.
hopefully, and I guess not necessarily hopefully he cools down a little bit in case I got to play him in the playoffs.
Right. Real quick, Antonio Gibson obviously looked really good yesterday, but Zeke has not looked good.
No.
He loses both of his starting tackles yesterday.
Yep.
So I think Zeke is going to, not having Zeke be Ezekiel Elliott, the
Yep.
3rd overall pick, is really going to hurt
Yep.
Bill down the stretch.
No, absolutely. So there we go. We got number 10 through number 4, and we need just the top 3 teams, if I recall correctly.
Yep.
Who do you got for your top 3? I know you got you, Pooty, and Roscoe left.
That's
who
who
we got as
we
the
leave.
top 3?
So I'm going to do them exactly in that order. I'm going to leave me at 3, which is where I was at last week. I've got Pooty at the 2 seed. He loses to Ross. We heard him talk about his depth a little bit, and we've talked about this already. Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs last week was probably the difference in that matchup. So I don't want to ding Pooty too hard there. Joe Burrow gets hurt in the middle of that game. He loses by 17 points. So I do think Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs were the difference there. So I don't want to ding him in the power rankings too far. So I've got Pooty 2, and then I've got Ross basically taking over the mantle at the 1 seed. You know, he comes out of that heavyweight bout, the victor, and locks himself into the bye. So again, you kind of got to tip your cap. He's got himself a squad there.
Yeah, you know, I mean, there's really zero discussion to be had there. I think Ross is the clear-cut number 1, despite the previously mentioned questions that we have about some of those wide receiver 2 and flex questions that he has. He also has some good options there that can kind of fill in.
Right.
But the key thing is, in every fantasy football championship team that we've had in the history of the Yarski, you have that running back dominant team. And right now, he's got 2 of the top 4 running backs, which is truly hard to beat. I mean, he says he's open to deals for Derrick Henry. I mean, I will start tooting that horn whatever we can and see what we can do. But
yeah, I intend to pull Ross to the side, lock him in a door, lock him behind a door until we get a deal done for Derrick Henry after this podcast.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And so I have zero problems truly with your overall power rankings. And do you want to give a quick insight of what you have for next week's highlight matchup that you have?
Yeah, you know, we usually what we've been doing for this marquee matchup, right, is this big game against good teams that really can determine how things are going to go. Well, guess what? We're going to do things a little differently.
Just a little bit.
This is my marquee matchup because it's what the people have wanted forever. We've got Axe's stinky 1-9 team, 1-10 team against Sap's 3-7 team. We've got Sap starting 2 tight ends. Both of them are still projected under 100 points.
Their ends are tighter than Sammy's.
I think what we call this is the Yarski Toilet Bowl, and I'm excited to watch that. What we're going to call marquee toilet bowl matchup.
It's the ultimate Sacco playoff championship preview, and you know what? I cannot wait. But you know what? I would be remiss in saying that even though those 2 teams are at the bottom, we do have a 2-time Sacco that, as of today, is in the Sacco playoffs. So I would be remiss in saying that he doesn't have a chance to be down there too. So I am looking forward to this matchup with Sap and Josh just as much as you, and see what all happens here. But it is going to be very interesting to see how it all ends up. And so one last thing that I kind of want to touch base on really quick was my projector for the Schultz and Beltino winner, because that was kind of the big highlight matchup in terms of the actual Yarski playoffs and shit that, well, let's be honest, actually matters, because no one really gives a shit about the other stuff. So my general bet, I'm actually going with Beltino being the winner. I mean, right now we're looking at the projections from yesterday. Obviously, it's taped on Friday. Both Schultz and Bilt both had huge games yesterday from the Thursday night slate, with Schultz having a big play from the Washington defense and Bilt having a huge game from Antonio Gibson. So I'm just kind of looking forward a little bit. And I think the difference maker, as weird as it seems, I think it's going to be the Cleveland defense. They're going up against Jacksonville's, and right now they're down to their 2nd or 3rd string quarterback, and DJ Chark is not going to be available. So right now Cleveland's going to sell up against the run, and right now I think there's a few turnovers, potentially a pick 6. And honestly, if you're giving me the betting odds, I think that the Cleveland defense is going to be the difference, along with potentially Chris Carson coming back and Russell Wilson going against that Philadelphia Eagles secondary. I think there's going to be a boatload of points between those 3 players, and I think that's going to be the difference.
Now, can I ask a question? Are you worried that you're a little bit biased because you really, really want Bill to win? Because it helps your playoff chances.
Well, the one thing that was actually against that opinion is if I happen to beat you this weekend, which we haven't talked about, which will be a good matchup. But right now, Ross is projected to beat Jared. If Schultz beats Bilt, I'm actually guaranteed the playoffs next week.
Really?
But unfortunately, if Bilt ends up winning, then I'm not guaranteed the playoffs, because we have the potential tiebreaker scenario of a 3-way tie. and then it's going to go down to points scored. And we can go into a little bit more detail of that next week, but we're going to wait till this week plays out, and we're already running a little bit of it long on this week's podcast, so we're not going to do a deep dive into it yet.
What did we say? When things get hairy, things get down to brass tacks, we got stuff to talk about. I know Axe wanted a half-hour podcast because he's too mad that we're talking shit about him for 45 minutes. Well, you know what? We got shit to talk about, so it's going to run a little longer.
Well, like you said, everything's bigger in Texas, and you know what? When things get hairy, I mean, we just look at Kirby's hair, and he's like, you know what? We got a lot of shit to reciprocate. So there's only so much we can truly do. So,
yeah,
you know what? This is a podcast for the people, and we're trying to do whatever bit we can. We're trying to bring a little bit of joy. We've had a little bit of positive feedback, just a little bit, and we hear that people's girlfriends are starting to pay attention, which I don't know why the fuck they're paying attention to it. Like, you're telling me that Lindsay's paying attention to it. I got my brother wanting me to send him YouTube links for it.
See?
All. So
Lindsay hasn't missed. You know, this is what you do. You put out fire content, you get positive feedback, you become famous. And look at us now. We're down in Texas, live shoot, live audience. You know, here we are.
Look at these.
Mama, we made it.
Look at these fucking calves or cows or whoever the fuck they're called. Pooty can give me shit about them later. But you know what? We're gonna end this thing on a very simple note. Cyclone Nation, rise up! It's fucking game day! Let's go!
Don't forget to giggle. Giggle.
We just like to welcome y'all to the South and give you a good old hello. This YarskCap drop brought to you by USA Beef. USA Beef. Buy it at your local store. Have a happy Thanksgiving, y'all.